I've never seen a financial tool that can lower your risk like IBC because number one, as Nelson would always say in his pinky moment, it never went down in value. Like on those bad days when the stock market was down 400 and 500 points, he'd take a cup of his coffee and say, Justin, I didn't lose money today. I made money today. That is very true. So if we have a foundational piece of our savings or investing with IBC, we know we have contractual guarantees. That's something that people in my business can't say often.
We want to start off by hearing your story of discovering the infinite banking concept.
Yeah, well, it's awesome to be with you guys today, Lee. Always enjoy it, and any opportunity to talk about Nelson and what becoming your own banker has done for me, for my family, and just for the thousands of people that we've been able to touch is always a lot of fun. So thank you for doing this. So it's kind of a funny story. I actually met Nelson. So I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. Our office is about 3.5 miles away from, where Nelson was living at the time that I met him. In January of 2008, I got invited to go to a conference. We were a traditional financial planning firm here in Birmingham. Our firm is Nowlin and Associates Wealth Management, and we were doing traditional investment management, retirement planning, those kind of things. And then we would do some insurance work for the families we worked with or businesses. So I got invited to a conference, Lee, that was in Orlando in January of 2008. And Nelson was speaking, and he was talking about his book and the concept. And it's kind of funny if you ever read the book, Nelson gets into the human factors, and he and I always had an ongoing joke back and forth because I will be honest with you, I had a little bit of the arrival syndrome. So when I heard Nelson talking, I'm like, man, this guy is awesome. He's like my grandfather. He's got a lot of wisdom, and I hear what he's saying, but I think we've got a pretty good thing, and we've kind of got this figured out. So I listened to it, really enjoyed it. Things were going well. Obviously, 2008, for anyone that of your listeners that's a little older, you know what 2008 entailed. It was a serious correction that year in the market in September and October, but you could feel that building up. So after the conference was over, a couple of months later, one of the gentlemen that invited me to the conference said, "Hey, have you read that book yet?" And it was sitting on the corner of my desk, right over here on the right side where I pile up, all the books that I'm supposed to read and haven't yet that people keep giving me. And I said, "No, I haven't read that." And he said, "Well, look, you really need to look through that." And he just continued to pester me. So I read the book, and I had some questions, and I flipped over and I realized on the back of the book, I'm like, wait a minute, this guy's office is in Birmingham, Alabama, and there's a phone number. So I called Nelson, got him on the phone. He was so gracious to come to the office, and I still have the yellow pad, Lee, where I had questions, and obviously everything I thought about is exactly what the listeners out there are thinking about. Hey, what's the rate of return? And hey, how does this compare to this other investment that I have? And Nelson was so gracious and really just took me through it and sparked a great relationship. I consider Nelson to this day a mentor of mine. He was a mentor and he was a friend, and he taught me as much about life and faith as he ever did about finance. But the genesis of that relationship was sitting around my round table and asking questions about his book, Becoming Your Own Banker. And it truly led to a paradigm change in our firm. And I feel like I'm rambling, so I'll be quiet. But our firm truly, after meeting Nelson, he always tells me that I was a slow learner because it took me, about 6 to 8 months before we really began to implement this as part of our planning process.
I can see him having that conversation with you,
So coming from a traditional finance background, what were some of the obstacles? What were some of the challenges early on that you faced when you wanted to start practicing the infinite banking concept?
I think they're the challenges that everyone faces when they read about this, because what has happened so often in the financial world is we have become accustomed to what we call being sold a product or being sold a service, right? And so we're so accustomed to, well, tell me, how's this good for me? What's the rate of return? How's this going to make more money than that over there? Or it's more of a product transaction mentality. And truly what Nelson says, and Nelson would always take me back to the very first page in the book, which every advisor that we hire always go through, because the second sentence in that book says, this is not a sales tool for life insurance agents. And it's not. It has nothing to do with selling life insurance. It is about educating you and him educating me on a process, a better process for warehousing wealth, for having control of the access to that wealth, and then building it more efficiently as you move forward. And so it's not a sales tool and it's not a product. In fact, insurance is only a piece of the process. And if it's not done the right way, it's not even a good piece, right? So it takes you as a client being educated, and you've got to get out. I tell people all the time that we're in a rut financially. And so you have to open your eyes to understand that there may be a different way, and you've got to remove yourself from that traditional path to understand that there are other options out there that you can grow your wealth more effectively, grow it more efficiently. And more than anything, a word that Nelson told me, and he was right about this. He said, all the things that you learn about infinite banking, I want you to remember one word, because it'll become the most important, and that's control, having control of the banking function and control of capital for yourself.
So how were you able to kind of, talk to these clients that you've been working with for so long and with some of the traditional means? How did you introduce this new concept to them? Because, it was very new back then when you first discovered it.
Lee, it's been a process for 17 years, or longer, as far as introducing these types of ideas. And so we basically just went to clients, and it's evolved over time. But what we wanted to share with them is we were excited that we have found an alternative for you, something that the way that I frame it is, hey, this is not something that everybody will do, but it's something everybody should know about. And so that's how we frame it. So my job as an advisor with clients, what I should be doing is, if I come across an idea or a concept that can benefit them, then I tell them all the time, then my job's to share it with you. And then we can explore together if it's something worthwhile to implement for you or not. And so basically I started with that simple question. We do our best to try to build a relationship, very much relationship oriented, to add value. That's our job as consultants, is we've got to add value to the client relationship. And there's nothing that I have seen in my practice, I've been doing this now 26 years, that has been able to add more value and more peace of mind than educating someone on how to take control of their capital and control of the banking function, and how that can enhance everything else they're doing. So it's really become a passion and something that I enjoy talking about. So I think they see that, hopefully, and hear that when they talk to us or someone here on our team.
Yeah. Going back to your Birmingham affiliation with Nelson, I don't want to go biblical early, but it's just, you would think that we'd have that Birmingham will be full of financial firms that were like Nelson Nash advocates, but we don't. Okay. I mean, the old hometown arrival syndrome, like, well, if he's from Birmingham, he must not know anything about the smart stuff, the financial planning things. So, but yeah, you guys are preeminent, no doubt about it. Top-notch group that spent a lot of time with Nelson, obviously. So you want to go into that piece?
Yeah, it was really awesome. We struck up a friendship, and Nelson, as I told you before, he knew that Nelson loved the Georgia Bulldogs, having graduated from there, and he knew that I had played a little football at Georgia Tech, or what he would call the North Avenue Trade School, over and over. So he would always make reference to that, and we had a lot of fun during football season. But he Nelson ended up, as David knows, he would come by our office if he were in town almost every Monday. In fact, Lee, you would like this. He had his own coffee cup, and the ladies up front had written his name on it, and so he knew. He came in, and we would have a cup of coffee waiting on him, and almost every morning we'd spend about 30 minutes together, he and I, before we went into our conference room and did training with a lot of our advisors and walked through case studies. And David knows this. I'd have to tell you, it was always intimidating because I would be at one end of the table. We have a pretty long table that seats 12 people, and he was at the other end staring at me. So here I am teaching his book, his concept. And I would always know if I was getting a little out of bounds, because I'd see him go, like this, and shoulders would come up. And so I learned over time, Lee, I'd say, Nelson, is there anything you'd want to add there? And he'd go, well, Justin, maybe one thing. So everything that we teach today, and I had the privilege of doing what we call a boot camp session last Monday. Everything we teach today was a genesis from Nelson being in those Monday meetings and being able to take some of the key points and characteristics from his book, which I'm here to tell you, if you don't have this book right here, you need to get it. It is the workbook that you will refer back to over and over as you implement this process. Mine's a little worn, as you can tell, and the pages are frayed because I've looked at it many, many times and I've shown examples to it. But everything we talk about really is a genesis from those Monday meetings and him sitting at the table and helping us understand how to better communicate IBC to the clients we serve.
Yeah, talk to us about that. How does that work with your clients? Your clients read Becoming Your Own Banker as part of that process?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so critical. I would be lying, and I hope this is beneficial to somebody out there. And I told Nelson this. I think part of just who we are, I guess, is part of your human characteristics. You're always trying to find ways to shorten things, make them more efficient. And I would be lying if I said we have not tried to figure out ways to bypass people reading the book, where we could somehow take a shortcut and have them, read a white paper or summary or send them a video. And all of those are great tools, but the tools go along with Nelson's book. And because the book is so integral, and what I have found over the years through a lot of trial and error for people that are learning IBC and people that are wanting to teach IBC, that are in the financial profession coaching people, is it starts and stops with Nelson's book. Okay. There's a lot of great tools out there that go along with it, but it starts and stops there. If you want your understanding to be better, you read his book, you write the questions down you have, and you talk to someone that knows more than you to help you answer those questions and get the right answers. I like to caution people, YouTube is a great thing to support what you're looking at, but there's a lot of information on any subject out there, and some of it's good and some of it isn't. But if you don't have a foundation to understand what you're looking for, it's easy to get led astray. And so Becoming Your Own Banker is the foundation. So every client we meet with in the process needs to read Nelson's book. We have some tools that can help them conceptually in the beginning understand if, hey, do I even want to take the step to read this book or not? And of course, we have some tools to support the book afterwards. But one integral part that I think everyone should not compromise on is read this book. It's only 90 pages. I mean, it'll take you less than an hour. I tell people, take 15 minutes a day, over the next 4 to 5 days. Read it, jot your questions down in the notes on the side, and you're going to be so much better off.
Well, yeah, we get calls, obviously, and emails and texts all the time, like, hey, where do I start? How do I find somebody to work with? And so I point them towards our practitioner finder, and they say, "Well, do you recommend anybody?" I said, "No, I can't, because everybody is a member. They've all been through the same educational process. But I'll tell you what you need to do is you need to interview these practitioners, and you need to have your Become Your Own Banker open in front of you, and you need to ask them questions out of the book, either legitimate questions that you have or something that really resonates with you, and get their take on it. And you'll find out pretty quickly if even though they're practitioners, if they're in the same place that you are, or they know how to help you based upon your interview with them. So the book is so critically important. And we tried, sit around here and go, okay, Nelson Action Institute, we need to provide products and everything to the consumers out there, but we can't replace the book. You can't really supplement the book. And the consistent story is like that is the Bible with a small b for the concept and for everything that's happened out there. And I can't replace it, obviously. But I wanted to go back to something even more important than that. You mentioned that Nelson had his own coffee cup. Well, Nelson was the king of using props during his seminars and whatnot. So he always used coffee cups for that. And so, obviously you've been to a million seminars and watched him live and whatnot, but, he actually bought one of those massive cartons of styrofoam coffee cups from Sam's, like, I don't know, 5,000 or something like that. And that's what he used because he had so many of them, he wanted to use them up. So I was wondering if when you guys wrote his name on the cup, was that a styrofoam cup or was that actually a ceramic coffee cup?
It was an actual coffee mug. But the funniest thing about it, David, it had a really small handle. So Nelson's pinky was always out when he would drink it. And I can remember that because, Lee, you'll love this, because when he made a really good point, he would always take a sip of his coffee cup and his pinky was always out. So you can ask any of our team members when I'm telling a story about Nelson or going through an illustration in the book, I'll always imitate him because now I drink a cup of coffee while we're doing training, and I'll always have my pinky out because that's what Nelson did. It's hilarious.
He needed to, give it time to marinate, let it take effect, let everybody to catch up with where he was already, because
he says something that like, and just wait for the laugh or whatever, yeah.
And his shoulders were always going up and down. He was laughing. It's great.
Well, Justin, how have you grown in your practice since you first started IBC? What are some things that maybe you would tell someone who's just starting off in their journey that you wish you would have known then, that you know now? How tell us about that journey and that growth.
Yeah, God, such a good question, and there's so many directions I could go with that, Lee. We just touched on one piece of it, but I want to expand. Obviously, I tell our team all the time, hey, there's a lot of arrows in my back because we've tried a lot of things to try to help people learn this. And like I said before, there's no substitute for the book. But the other thing that I really learned from Nelson, is the importance of consistency, right? I had, and you guys know who he is, a gentleman named Larry Bird, spelled with a Y, not an I. He's not a tall fellow like the basketball player, pretty short guy. But Larry would come in and consult with us on communication, how we can communicate better. And one of the things he used to say is, hey, that worked so well, we stopped doing it, right? And why do you stop doing it? Because you think that you have to always evolve. But Nelson's seminar, and David, you're right. I mean, I can't tell you how many seminars I heard. It was the same story. It was the consistency of that. And I think that is something that I really believe has helped me, is because I know that I'm going to talk about page 17, the problem and the solution, right? I'm going to talk about that. Page 17 in the book's one of my favorite pages, right? So the consistency of that, I know the point that I really want to try to make to help people discover why they want to take control of the banking function for themselves. So the consistency of having your message and having your message line up exactly with Nelson's teaching, I think is extremely important. It's really easy in this day and time, again, to get to want to go down different avenues. And all of those are great as supporting pieces, but don't forget the main purpose is you are there to help people and to help people understand exactly what the problem is, because once you understand the problem, the solution becomes pretty easy.
That's great advice. Thank you for sharing that. Earlier we talked a little bit about the YouTube. You brought that up, and that there's a lot of information out there. And I'm sure you've had some clients, say, "Hey, this infinite banking thing, this is a scam." They're coming in from some wrong information that they've gathered. How do you debunk that with them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think this is very important, and everybody has their own way, maybe, of doing it. So I actually love it when we have clients or people that are learning about IBC and they have questions, right? Because that's the opportunity to learn. So, I mean, one of the most common questions, and don't let me go too far off into the weeds here, but one of the most common questions is, "Hey, I've always heard insurance is a terrible place to park money." And so instead of trying to go down a path that is in disagreement with that, the best thing we can do, I think, is agree, because what the client's saying actually has a factual basis. Life insurance designed for a death benefit may not be a great place to park your money for long term. However, that's not what we're doing. So, hey, whoever told you that was great advice. That's not what we're doing. Nelson showed us that we're going to solve for a different variable. So we're not solving for death benefit. We're solving for something different. Let's talk about your need for finance. Let's talk about your need for whether it's overcoming liabilities or buying additional assets. Let's talk about your need for capital and how much of that you want to be in control of. And that's the variable we're going to solve for. And the death benefit is a byproduct of that, right? And so let's solve for that. And then we'll talk about if it's a good place to park money or not, compared to the other options and places that you could park money: bank accounts, savings accounts, bond funds, whatever the case may be. Let's look at it in comparison to what it's supposed to be compared to, not something that it's not. So I think that's important, to embrace those questions and help people identify exactly what you're doing. And I'm just going to go back to another thing. If you truly are a practitioner out there and you understand this book and you truly understand what Nelson was teaching, you'll welcome those questions, because all they are learning opportunities.
Yep. That's a great way to think about those, some of those pushbacks maybe that you see it initially as a negative thing, but it's a great opportunity to turn it into a learning moment for you and whoever you're talking to. I love that. How has infinite banking concept, how has that changed your clients' lives? How have you seen that work for them? Can you share some of those stories with us?
It has helped in so many different ways. One of the first examples that come to mind, I think there's so many wonderful stories about seeing people paying off liabilities. There are several examples of people expanding their assets, whether it's real estate or growing their business and using the infinite banking concept in their business. But I just want to tell you one that I saw firsthand that just really makes me appreciate the control factor and the safety features of IBC. During COVID, we had a lot of business owners as clients, and obviously businesses were closed down for different periods of time. And what was amazing is to see the amount of people that had access to capital, that were able to keep their businesses open, that were able to keep their employees on staff, and just the amount of goodwill that created. And in some situations, the amount of opportunity that created, where some offices had to be closed for a certain period of time, or they needed bank financing, or they couldn't continue. We've had clients that owned restaurants that were able to stay in business where their competitors actually did not and went out of business. And as the economy recovered, they picked up so much more so many more clients and so much more business because of the fact of having access to capital and having a pool of money that they controlled, where they didn't have to worry about, the qualifications at a traditional financial institution like a bank, or certain cash flow requirements each and every month that they had to make. And I have people to this day that we do annual reviews, and they continue to thank us and thank Nelson for learning about IBC, because it kept their livelihood going during a really tough time when life just threw a curveball. And that, we talk about all the wonderful wealth building ideas that the infinite banking concept can do for us, and I think that's great. But I saw it firsthand as we walked through that 2020 and parts of 2021, where people needed access to capital, and it just created so much safety for them. And that's one of the things I'm really thankful for. But we got a ton of success stories that are always fun to talk about.
That scenario you're talking about that's kind of what started this whole thing with Nelson personally. He didn't initially realize he had access to that capital. And of course, he didn't have enough capital, but he realized how to get more, how to build his system. Again, going back to social media, everybody's launching their take on the infinite banking concept and how it's like so great for this or so great for that, and that's their total focus. But really, the way you explained it, it's a foundational financial philosophy that underpins anything you want to do, whether it's growing a business or preparing and protecting yourself against the downturns, or whatever. It's multifaceted. I guess that's why Nelson calls it. Initially, it was infinite banking concepts, plural, even though it's one concept, but it has many different uses and applications. So.
And that was one of the things, David Nelson would always say. I called it a pinky moment. I described that earlier, but Nelson would always say, we still to this day, we manage over $1 billion in investable assets. But IBC, Infinite Banking Concept, is a foundation. And it's a foundation because of what you just said, David. If you're looking at a financial plan for someone, what my job needs to be is to show them how they can lower the risk to their family. I've never seen a financial tool that can lower your risk like IBC, because number one, as Nelson would always say in his pinky moment, it never went down in value. Like on those bad days when the stock market was down 400 and 500 points, he'd take a cup of his coffee and say, Justin, I didn't lose money today. I made money today. And that is very true. So if we have a foundational piece of our savings or investing with IBC, we know we have contractual guarantees. That's something that people in my business can't say often, but you actually have that with a life insurance product structured properly. You have a contractual guarantee. So it offsets your risk. But the other thing that it does is when you have cash flow hiccups and life throws curveballs, and I don't care how much money you have, you always have ebbs and flows in cash flow. Well, if you owe money to a traditional financial firm, you have to make that payment every month or they're going to come take that asset. Well, with IBC, and you're a business owner and your equipment is financed in your own banking system where you own it and control it, we don't want to do it long term, but guess what? I've just lowered your risk because we can pay interest only, or we can take 3 months off until our cash flow catches back up, and then we can make up that liability to ourselves and to an entity we own and control. So on both facets, on the asset side and the liability side, I have just made your life less risky. And that is why it's another reason why it's a foundational piece of a financial plan. It fits right in. And I know a lot of people out there may not be in the investment business, and that's totally okay. But it goes hand in hand if you really look at it the right way.
It's just a function of scale, really. What are your liabilities, and can you scale to meet that need or whatever? So banks don't make money on your deposits, do they? They make money on lending your money, in some cases 10 times your money. So why can't you control the banking function yourself?
Justin, you obviously spent a lot of time with Nelson in person and just over the years and with clients. And, are there any other special stories that really stick out in your mind whenever you think about Nelson and your time together?
Yeah, well, Lee, one of my favorite stories, and I wish I had it recorded. So late in his life, he got an award from FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education. I think it was the Torchlighter Award, if I remember correctly. And so he asked me that day, would I mind driving him to Atlanta to where their office was? And I said I'd be honored to, because I definitely wanted to go and see that. So we got stuck in a little bit of traffic, surprise, in Atlanta. And so after he made fun of me for going to the North Avenue Trade School, we stuck in that traffic. We got into a conversation, and I'm not to get religious at all, but it was phenomenal, because he began to take me through the economics of the Bible and how every significant event was preceded by some sort of economic issue, and it was. So I wish I could remember all of it, Lee, and I can't. But I mean, it talked about if you're if you're a reader of the Bible, it talks about Jesus turning over the tables in the temple. What preceded that and what happened to it? It talks about the exodus of the nation of Israel and the Jewish people out of Egypt, and what preceded that and what the economics of that were. And it was just it was an amazing talk. And I tell people that's one of my favorite memories that I wish I had a recording. He told me a lot about the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, which is the very first story in the first book of Genesis, and how that had to do with ownership. And it's, are you an owner or are you a customer? And if you're the owner, then you have to pay the price. And sometimes we choose to pay our own price, or sometimes if you're a person of faith, you have someone that paid that price for you. And it was just how it all tied together in economics. It was awesome. So that's one of my favorite memories. Yeah.
Well, he loved spending time with people for sure. He loved sharing everything that he knew with those around him. And we are obviously greatly blessed by that. As we wrap up our time together, do you have any parting thoughts that you want to end with?
Yeah, I'm just, it's awesome that you guys have this opportunity for people to hear more about the infinite banking concept. And I call that, David, I remember one of the workshops you had years ago, one of the think tanks, what right looks like. And hearing how Nelson taught this, that's what right was. And I think it's awesome that you guys are getting, a lot of different people that had the opportunity to hear Nelson and learn from him on here. I'm very thankful. It's one of the blessings of my career. And I mean that to Leah, met your grandfather, and obviously David, your father-in-law, to spend time with him. I don't know that there's not many days that go by where I don't think about him or tell a story, about him and what we shared. And I'm certainly very thankful for the relationship, but I'm thankful that I get to maybe play a small part in, having helped thousands of people around the country implement this concept for themselves.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Justin, for your time today. And thank you for all that you've done to continue spreading this concept with those around you.